Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today, I'm joined by Matt Tenney, author of Inspire Greatness: How to Motivate Employees with a Simple, Repeatable, Scalable Process. Matt is a leadership expert who helps organizations build highly engaged teams that perform at their best. In this conversation, he shares practical insights on how leaders can create workplaces that people actually love. Now, if you're looking for ways to improve your company culture, you're going to love this episode. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Matt is an entrepreneur, speaker, podcaster, and author who envisions a world in which all leaders and workplace cultures consistently make a positive impact on the well being and growth of team members. He is the author of 3 leadership books, including Inspire Greatness: How to Motivate Employees with Simple, Repeatable, and Scalable Process. His inspiring leadership TED Talk has been viewed over 1 million times. And since 2014, Matt has delivered programs that help develop world class leaders who improve engagement, retention, and performance for companies like Salesforce, T. Rowe Price, Roche, Marriott, Keller Williams, United Airlines, L'Oreal, Canon, and Signet Jewelers. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more from his experience and his leadership approach. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, and I'm a fan of the work that you're doing. Especially, we're going to talk a little bit about your TED Talk and what you focus on there because it resonates with me quite a bit. But first of all, you work, as I mentioned, you work to help organizations hit their goals, hit their strategic goals, but also doing it in a way that improves employee engagement and retention. So, what do you see as the biggest obstacle when it comes to achieving goals with most businesses? What are they getting wrong? What are they struggling with?
Well, I think there tends to be this disconnect, almost like this dichotomy in people's minds that you have to have it's a one or the other proposition, right? You can either be very high performing, very agile, responding to change very quickly, uh, or you can have a culture where you're a great place to work. Everyone wants to come work for you because it's such a cool, great culture. And I think this is set up for a number. This has been established for a number of reasons. But how it plays out in a lot of organizations is the whole process of how we manage performance has kind of devolved into like a basically a project that's delegated to HR. And of course, the human resources team is absolutely an essential partner for making it so that this dichotomy doesn't exist, which it doesn't have to, by the way, right? There doesn't have to be an either or. We can have really exciting, challenging goals that excite the team members as well and get them excited to come to work and go to execute on the strategies for achieving those goals in ways that allow people to thrive, allow them to grow, allow them to feel like they're making an impact. So I think the HR team is absolutely essential in this process of kind of removing this dichotomy that we might have in the mind. But what has happened, unfortunately, and this is probably going to sound very, it's going to resonate, I think, with a lot of people, is that what tends to happen is, over time, what used to be the core mechanism for ensuring that the strategy was executed has devolved into this check the box admin activity that HR hates, the managers doing the reviews hate, and the employees hate, right? So this to me is the biggest obstacle is that the way that we're viewing the approach to performance management is that it's just an admin activity. It's a and because of this, they tend to focus. A lot of organizations are still doing annual reviews, and those annual reviews, and if they're doing more frequent check-ins, it's just kind of going through the motions. They're not truly coaching people in those. But what tends to happen with these annual reviews is that people just they're showing up and they leave feeling judged and demoralized, and it's not helping them achieve greater success in the future because these meetings are essentially a mechanism for judging people to determine whether they get a pay raise, whether they get a promotion, and in many cases to protect companies from lawsuits. So this, I think, it's really like that's the number one main obstacle is just this structure of how performance management has devolved, I would say. And then the second is that even if the structure is really good, and we can go into what a good structure looks like, but even if the structure, the approach to performance management is sound, then the next biggest obstacle, and this is probably more common actually, is that the managers operating within the organization have not been trained to be effective coaches.
Hmm.
So if they are having regular meetings with team members, they don't know how to have a feedback conversation that leaves someone feeling inspired versus judged. They don't know how to ask good questions that help people grow and develop as human beings and as professionals and into leaders. And as a result, everyone just feels like the whole mechanism is just an admin thing that we got to check the box to do it, but it's not moving us towards hitting the strategic goals for the organization. And in many cases, it's actually hurting. It's actually hurting performance.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm nodding my head a lot over here because having done 22 years working for three global companies, that's exactly what performance reviews were and performance management was a check the box thing. Even as a leader, um, they were so scripted in terms of what we could and couldn't do. And I remember they would give us the bell curve. This is the way your employees should fall. You have to, only a certain amount can get a high rating, then only a certain amount can get the next rating. It's like, what if I'm a really good leader and I've hired really good people and
Exactly.
I have a killer team. Everyone has to follow the same curve,
Yeah, I
and
got to just jump in on that one,
sure.
John, because basically what that structure is telling you
Yeah.
is that either all your managers are bad or your hiring process is horrible because you're basically admitting that a third of the people you hire are morons,
Yeah.
right? Like how on earth would you let that happen? Right? So this whole like forced ranking thing is beyond ridiculous, right? It's not helpful.
It's interesting because when I started my company 9 years ago, I just said we're not doing them. I mean, like at all.
Yeah.
And it's bad because I know there's value in it, but I think it just after 22 years of feeling like I was checking the box and I was wasting time, and like you said, people would be demoralized because you force rank them, and you're like, well, they just happen we happen to have a rock star on our team that's going to get the high rating, and you're going to get the next highest rating, and it was very frustrating to people, and it was frustrating to me when I was being reviewed by my bosses. So I just
Mm.
when I started the new company, I was like, we're gonna just have regular feedback, and so we have nothing in writing. So I've never done a performance review, a formal one, since we started the company. So
Well, that's great. Now, in larger organizations, I think the HR. Do you have an HR director in your
we
company?
do not. No,
Okay,
no.
so that not that obviously I'm a huge fan of HR professionals. I mean, these are the people that are on our side, John, right? These are the
Right,
people who
right.
live to make great places to work where employees can thrive. But they also have responsibilities to protect the company from employment lawsuits, and it's very important to them to have documentation of performance-related conversations. So, like in any large organization, it's kind of a requirement to have some type of written documentation about what happened, but it doesn't have to be an annual review, which for anyone who's been in corporate America knows what this is like. If you're a manager, you're just like, oh my gosh, here goes
Yeah.
2 weeks of my life at the end of the year because I got to write, 10 hours worth of crap for 10 people on my team, and I got to think back 12 months ago what happened. The managers hate it. And of course, the employees hate it. They're like, what are you talking about? I did this 12 months ago. I don't even remember that,
Yeah, it's not timely, and it's not a lot of cases it's not the kind of feedback that really helps people get better, right? It's like you said, it's more of the check the box. One thing is that you want to touch on, you talk about, you know you help organizations hit their goals. One of the things I noticed when I came out of the military, went into corporate America, was I didn't know what the goal was. When I was in the Navy, the mission was clear, right?
Right.
We'd go out, we'd do something really dangerous, and we get everybody home safe. That was our goal. We did it every time, right? But everybody knew the mission, and it was very clear. And so I know when I came into corporate, one day it was like we got to reduce scrap. Next one, we got to get our customer satisfaction up, our on time delivery. and like, so the mission was never clear. And I know when I took over businesses, I spent a lot of time focusing on like, here are the few things that we need to get done this year, or this
Yes,
week or this month, because I really felt, I felt like we did a poor job in boiling it down to the few things that you want people to remember to take action on. Sometimes we put the goals as the big corporate goals, and it doesn't really apply to our local operations. And so I think our job as local managers is to break down that big, strategic goal into what do we want our people to do today, tomorrow, this month. Is that something you also see when you do your work?
absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
a lot of organizations get this right to a point. So the C-suite will get, and by the way, many don't. Many are creating 10 priorities. And I don't remember the exact definition of priority, but I think it comes from a root word, which literally means one thing. So
Mm. Yeah.
anything more than one priority, it's no longer a priority, right? So,
Right.
but we've now kind of that word has evolved to mean something a little bit different in many people's minds. But the point is like you can't do in a quarter, you can't achieve 10 really big goals. No one can do that. And if you try, you probably won't achieve anything because you're too spread out, right? So some organizations aren't getting that part quite right yet, but most are. I would say most have understood that. Like most CEOs know, you got to have maybe three, four tops of big strategic objectives, right? That you want to hit for a quarter. And then where a lot of organizations do well, at least the organizations that we're speaking to, and working with, is that they'll do a very good job of cascading those down through a certain level of management. So let's just say in a larger organization where you've got C-suite, VP, director, frontline manager, just to make things simple, right? Usually they're getting cascaded down pretty well down to the director level. And then after that, it starts getting a little fuzzy, right?
Yeah.
So, like the C suite says, here's our three big goals. All right, VP team, why don't you put some thought into this? How is your team going to contribute to this? What are goals that are binary? Like they either happen or they don't, that affect this, our big C suite goals, right? The goals for the organization. Boom, they got that. Then the VPs say, okay, directors, here's our organization's goals. At the VP level, here are our three strategic goals. How does your team or division contribute to this? What are the three goals that you're going to set that are binary? They either happen or they don't, that are aligned with our goals, which then are aligned with the C-suite goals, right? Then after that, it gets a little fuzzy. And in people's defense, it's tricky. Like, let's just say you're in accounting, for instance, and let's just say, a goal was to, let's just say it was to grow revenue by 30% over in a quarter. And if you're in accounting, you're thinking, well, let me change it just a little bit. Let's say it was to increase profit margin by 1%. Let's just say, okay? That'll make the accounting one a little bit easier of an example. So we want to increase our gross profit margin by 1% over the next quarter. And if you're in accounting, you're thinking, well, how on earth do I affect that? My job is to just make sure all the accounts are reconciled and that all of our numbers, our balance sheets are balanced, right? So, but it could be done, right? They could say, well, yes, that's our core job, is to make sure that everything's recorded accurately, everything's reconciled, everything's balanced. However, it takes time to do that. What processes are we using to make that happen? Is there a way that if we improved our processes, that we could reduce the time it takes for us to do those things and thereby reduce labor expense? Well, doesn't that contribute to gross margin? Well, or net margin, at least it does, depending on how the business is structured. But so now they have a tangible goal. They could say, well, let's see if we can increase our speed of doing this particular process by 5%. And we calculate that would make an impact towards this goal of net margin and gross margin. And now that's measurable, right? And of course, the goal is increasing speed without losing accuracy, right? So how do we improve our processes to be able to do this more efficiently, then giving us time to think more strategically about other things, right? And
Yes.
now we're moving the needle as part of this team instead of just being people who are basically autonomously or I mean, operating almost as autonomons, just or automatons, like doing the same thing every day. I put these numbers in, I make this balance, I think a little bit, but mostly it's just doing what I'm told. Now they're empowered to think strategically. So that can happen at any level, and I think that's where it starts getting fuzzy is down at the junior manager. You have individual contributors who their job is, I mean, let's just say your job is to sweep the floors. Like, how do you set a goal on that? Right?
Yeah.
Well, you just have to put some thought into it. And the more important part is that it has to be a goal that the employee is excited about, that whoever's reporting to you has to be excited about. So for that, you just need to make sure it's tied into something that's important to them, which is why managers need to frequently meet with their people and know what's important to their team members, right? Because if I know, let's say I have a janitor who reports to me, and I know that that person wants to go to college 2 years from now. And knowing that, I say, my job is to help you get there. Whether you're with our company or not, I want to help you get to college. Let's look at what are some goals you could set to contribute to our strategic goals for the team that will help you develop the skills and the traits you need to be successful in college. And now every time we have a conversation, it ties into something that's important to them in two ways, personally and in terms of how it impacts the organization. So
I
we can
love that.
show, look, this is what you did, and this is how it contributes to the strategic goals for our team and how that's aligned with the organization. And this is how it's helping you achieve what your long-term goal for 2 years from now, which is going to college. So that's where I think a lot of organizations need some help is cascading those goals down from director level down to frontline managers and having those frontline managers then create co-created goals with their team members where the team members are actively participating in the goal creation process, learning what a good goal looks like, and also setting their own KPIs. How do I know if I'm on track? So that I, as a manager, am no longer judging that person. They're judging themselves. Every week
Mm.
when we check in, like, hey, how's it coming? Those KPIs that you created, did you see improvement? Are you stagnant or did you not see, or did you decline? Okay, whatever the case is, did it go backwards a little bit? Fine. What was in your way? Like, what was the block? What do you
Yeah.
need from me? What do you need from your team? And this is the big shift, right? That's kind of I'll pause for a moment here before we go into the second obstacle, which is managers who aren't trained to do this. But this is the big shift is managers need to move from thinking themselves as a manager or a boss to thinking of themselves as a coach,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
My job is to coach you to win, to
Yeah.
help you succeed professionally and personally.
So it's interesting, because a lot of times, in this leadership world that I'm in, sometimes I get the question, is it what's more important, the objective or the people? And I
Yes,
think back on my time in the military and it was both, right? It was
exactly.
an and equation. And what you're talking about is that and. So we need our people, right, to help achieve our goals. So the goals are just as important as the people are. And so when you're having this discussion, as you mentioned, where they're developing their own KPIs and they're taking the goals of the business and they're wrapping it around what do I do and how can I contribute. They're now it's like, okay, they have ownership. They own that KPI. They own that. So now you have another person rowing the boat, another person with an oar in the water helping you versus a top down, your job is it reduce scrap 20%. It's like, well, I sweep the floors. I don't know how I can affect that. Which by the way, a lot of times in my career, I got goals that I had no influence over, and I just smiled and like, okay, well, it is what it is. I can't affect that one. So being at a vice president level, sometimes I would get like the North America, profit level. That's one of your incentives. I'm like, okay, well, I'll do my part, for what I can control, but I can't control what's happening in Mexico and Canada. So, but yeah, I think what you're talking about is that connector, it's the mission and the people that are critical.
Absolutely. And it's this is where the disconnect I think comes in is that particularly people, I would imagine that you're a huge fan of servant leadership just based on what I know of you. And a lot of people hear that term and they think you can't be a servant leader and hold people accountable.
Mm,
And there's nothing further from the truth. I mean, just think of parenting. I've got two young kids. Do you think if I don't hold them accountable to their own behaviors at school for what they eat, what they digest, and in terms of content, do you think I'm setting them up for success or failure?
right.
I love my kids. I want to set them up to be happy and successful. To do that, I need to help them develop healthy habits. I need to hold them accountable, help them to take responsibility for their own decisions, their own actions. So that's kind of the shift too, is that if you truly care about people, like not only is it okay to hold people accountable, but it's one of the key things that shows that you care. Because if
Mm,
you don't, you're basically telling people like, I'm okay if I set you up for a life of pain because I didn't help you develop the habits for excellence, right? But the other thing is like this shift of it's my job to hold them accountable, which is why I don't really like that term. It's more of how do I set it up so that they're so excited about what they're working on that they hold themselves accountable.
that's it.
That's even better. And
Yeah.
so, one simple way of doing that is what you were just kind of alluding to this is once people co-create their own goals, they set their own KPIs, they don't feel like you're holding them accountable. They're holding themselves accountable. And, one really powerful way to do this, where you have frequent check-ins, is to have a weekly coaching to win meeting is what we call it, where everyone everyone on a team gets together and they say, hey, what were the goals you were working on this week? Which ones did you hit? Which ones didn't you hit? Let's talk about let's celebrate those wins. That's awesome. And let's also talk about what got in your way. What the ones that didn't get hit? Why did that happen? Tell us about that. And sometimes you'll find 90% of the time it's not the person, it's a process. As the manager, you can remove those roadblocks for people, or a team member can say, oh, I know how to fix that process, let me help you with that. So there's so much power that comes out of that, is you have people showing up excited to talk about the goals that they hit, and knowing that if they didn't hit a goal, they're not going to be judged, they're going to be coached and get support on how to make sure they hit it next time.
Mm,
That's performance management, right?
yes.
And when you do it in a group setting like that, it also kind of creates group accountability, right? Who wants to be the person showing up every week who misses their goals every time, right?
Right.
I don't know
Right.
anyone that wants to do that. So there's like this intrinsic motivation. I want to show up being the person who hit my goals, or if I didn't, to have a good explanation for what got in the way, and ask for help on how to fix the block.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, we talk a lot about the lack of engagement in most companies today, employee engagement, but that's how you get employees engaged, right? They want to win, that as you mentioned, they co-create their goals. They're working hard to achieve them. They're proud of their accomplishments. They have control over their world. We're giving them control. And then you raise that level of engagement, that they want to be part of it. And so I think instead of just, well, the boss told me I got to do this, this month, I'm going to try to do as best I can. But, it just, a lot of times in corporate, sometimes the goals come from on high and you just, do your best to meet them, and,
Right.
but with this process, the way you explain it, you want to achieve it. You want to, and you're part of it. And if you can build the team and the relations in such a way, everybody's wanting to win together, like a winning sports team, where it's like, hold me accountable because I want to help us win the championship, right? and i
Absolutely.
and I've been on teams like that where it gets that way, where there's high level of peer accountability because we want to win together. It's not, it's a lot, it's more of us against the world versus us against each other.
In fact, that's what we don't call our performance management system a performance management system. We call it achieving greatness together.
I
And so
love it.
you nailed it. We're
Yeah,
working together to make a big impact on the lives of other people and the lives of the people in our organization.
I love that. So how do we make this transition? As you mentioned, leaders are not necessarily trained on how to be coaches. They haven't had the best role models. They don't necessarily get the greatest training. When we make them managers, we take the best individual contributor and give them the manager title. So how do we get them to develop their ability to be coaches?
Well, this is me, kind of killing my own old business model, which I still do. I still think there's a lot of value in, a half a day of training or a full day of training. The problem is I'm sure you've seen, or when you were in the corporate world, or maybe even you've seen after that with your own business, if you've done some internal training, is that when we do a big half a day or a full day of training, everyone's excited, everyone takes pages of notes, and then they get back to the office and they get hit in the face with reality, and nothing changes
Yeah,
because we've done 4 hours of information transfer and we've done nothing to develop a new habit. It would be like me, trying to teach you how to play golf in one day, and just teaching you everything and expecting you to be a scratch golfer in one day. That's just We don't learn anything like that. But for some reason, we think we can do leadership training or a leadership development program. Some people even call it um, in one day. Now, again, I'm a huge fan of starting training with an in-person event, half day, full day. But the primary purpose there is not behavior change. It may be a little bit, but it's the primary purpose is to set the context so people understand why they're about to engage in additional training so that they're engaged with that training, so that they're inspired to actually do it. So, if we set the context of, look, everything you're about to learn is going to help you have less stress as a boss, to find more meaning and fulfillment, and as a nice side effect to hit some big strategic goals, right? Now, of course, that's how you pitch it to the managers, right? To the C-suite, the focus is hitting strategic goals, and the side effects are everyone's well-being is enhanced, engagement is up. But if you're a manager who's going to engage in training, you want to help them see this is going to save me time, save me stress, and help me find more meaning and fulfillment at work. And if people can see that and they realize everything I'm going to learn over the next period of time, whatever that period of time is, contributes to that, I'm in, right? Because
Yeah.
and so that's why the idea is we call it the Inspire Greatness program, because it's the idea is you want to and feel free, anyone that's creating internal training, you can go ahead and steal that, because if you think about, I mean, what is your primary job if you're a leader of people?
Yeah.
It's to bring out the best in your team, right? I mean, this is just like, it's so common sense it almost sounds trite. But if you ask people like, hey, what's your core job as a leader? Very rarely do you hear an answer like that.
Yeah.
So what we want everything to have a context of my job is to bring out the best in my team so that I'm thriving and so that they're thriving and that we all hit big strategic goals together, see that impact and have fun doing it, right? So now the question is like, well, if we can't do it all in one day, how do we do it? And what I recommend is you have like just in time training for the performance management process, right? So when you're getting ready to cascade goals, have a brief training that helps people do that, then let them go practice with it. Then once they've done it, have a follow-up session to say what worked, what didn't work, what questions do you have, right? So then once they've set they've cascaded the goals, now they're meeting with their direct reports and they're helping them to create their own goals and their own KPIs. Same thing. How do you help people do that? When they're getting ready to have their first coaching to win meeting, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many, if the whole team is doing it as a group, how do you facilitate that? And then after that, just little trainings. What we recommend is just micro trainings, literally 5-minute videos that help people consistently, like one at a time, developing the habits of good coaches, right? So if I give you just one little thing to do, maybe 2 new habits, and I give you 2 to 3 weeks to practice it, that's how you have behavior change. It's like, just to use a sports analogy here, it's like, let's say I was trying to help you with your free throws, John. Let's say you're a basketball player. You asked me to help you with your free throws. And the first approach could be I watch you shoot 10 free throws, and then I talk to you for 15 minutes and tell you 26 things you need to fix in how you shoot free throws. And I say,
Yeah.
okay, John, go do that. I'll see you tomorrow. Like, we all know how effective that's going to be, right? Nothing is going to change. But if I said, John, I'm noticing that when you're shooting your free throws, your elbows flared out a little bit. What I'd like you to do is make sure your elbow's underneath your hand every time. Let's take 10 shots like that, see how it feels. You say, holy cow, it's going straighter. I've got more leverage. I'm shooting with less effort. I like this. Great. Why don't you spend the next hour practicing that, and we'll meet tomorrow to talk about the next thing, right? And then the next day we say, hey, let's review that. Let's take a couple more shots to get that into muscle memory. Then we do the next thing. So that's what I recommend and what we see working the best, in organizations that do leadership development very well, is that they're not going to change the world in a day. But
Yeah.
what they can do is they can start with the most highly leveraged activities, i.e., creating clear goals that people are excited about, that they can see how they make an impact to it. They create their own KPIs, and then how to develop some habits for coaching people to win. And then little by little, develop more and more habits of effective coaches over time.
I love that. Yeah, you don't learn golf by watching a video. You learn it by learning a technique and then trying it and then see what works, what doesn't work, and then getting that feedback and maybe learning something else. And so, it's, and I also often talk about leadership is a little bit like chess, where you can learn it in a short amount of time, but it takes a lifetime to sort of master, and to become a really good coach, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to master these things. So you have to have the practice, you have to have the feedback, you have to be given it. It's an iterative process, right? And I love that you nail that, because so many times we would go to these training sessions and everyone get excited, and then a year later nobody even remembers what the training was. And that was always frustrating too. It was like, okay, that was the message of the month, right? And so
Right.
we forgot about that now. But I think you're right. The good companies stay on mission, stay on task with this is how we're going to create a better organization, is by having these managers, leaders trained up as coaches, and we're committed to this over the long term. I love that. I love that idea. I love that concept. I was watching your TED talk, and it's super, and we're going to put a link to your TED talk on here because I love it. But you focus on this concept, and I want to ask you about it. That you say the best leaders make love their top priority. Now, listeners to this show have listened for a while. Love always, not always, but often comes up in the conversation of leadership. Tell us why you have focused on that subject of love. That's very interesting.
Well, there's maybe just we'll touch on the logical side first, and then we'll maybe get into the more, I guess, emotional intelligence side of it first. But we start with the left brain here, which is, if you just think about it logically, if we're always focused on numbers more than people, and you see this with publicly traded companies all the time, right? Where what happens if you get overly focused on quarterly profits, you end up over time, you end up neglecting people.
Hmm.
And if you neglect people, then you eventually will fail to serve the customer, right? Either you won't be good at sales, your product quality will suffer, customer service will suffer. When people are neglected, the customer will eventually become neglected. Because there's a saying I love, that the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience, right? So if the employees are neglected, the customers will be neglected. And I don't know of too many businesses that can survive very long if they're not serving their customers, because we're in a free market economy and someone else will be happy to come in and serve those customers for you, right? So that's kind of the logical idea of like, well, why should people be the top priority? And we'll come to the love component in a second here. But I think that's why. Of course, we're not saying that you don't mind your expenses. We're not saying that you don't set aggressive targets for growth, for profitability. The point is you don't chase those things at the expense of human beings. Because if you do that consistently, or even for a short period of time, actually, you'll neglect people, they'll neglect your customers, and you're going to be in trouble pretty fast. And you see this with for-profit companies, where then they end up, their core business is gone, and all they're doing is they've failed to serve their customers, so they're just financially restructuring, buying and selling stuff. They've basically turned into a financial services company at that point, right? So why is love the top priority? Why should it be? Because it's kind of like what we were referring to earlier. When I love someone, it's not a feeling, right? This doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I necessarily even like the person. Love is a verb, it is an action. And what love means in action is that I'm extending myself, maybe sacrificing myself, even just a little bit, so that that other person might thrive. And what happens in organizations where that is the top priority, and again, assuming you've got good business acumen, you've created a sound strategy, you're minding your growth and your expenses, that's all a given, right? But if the top priority is creating an organization where the manager's top priority is to take care of their team members,
Hmm.
and employees' top priority is to take care of the person to their left and their right, what happens is you create an organization where people are thriving, where they are highly engaged, where they provide excellent customer service, quality goes up. I mean, the core business thrives when that happens. And the key reason engagement goes up is that if a lot of organizations, you hear all this talk about creating an inspiring mission and
Yeah.
vision statement. And I'm not knocking that. That's important work. But I think there's much lower hanging fruit. If you want to create high engagement, create an organization where the top priority for everybody is to take care of the person to their left and their right, because now every day of coming to work is meaningful, right? Every day you have a conversation with your spouse when you go home about, man, you should have seen what my colleague did for me. You should have seen what my boss did for me. You should have seen how I took an hour to help this person. Like, that's the type of organization you want, where people truly take care of each other and they know that that's more important than anything. That's where you get people who are like literally excited to come to work on Monday because they're going, they've created their own goals, right? That they're excited about. They can see how they're making progress, how they're impacting the organization, and they're doing it with people who care about them and who they care about as well.
I love
That's an
that.
organization that everyone wants to be a part of.
I love that. And if listeners, if you've never if you've never worked for a company like that, then create the company, create the department, create the atmosphere, because I have worked for companies that happened, and it's magical, and it's a great place to work, and you can't wait to get into work every day. But most workplaces aren't like that. So this is really, really, Matt, that's really good advice. And we're going to put a link to the show, to your TED talk, because I think you really hit on some really important things in that, and is an important priority. And I encourage every listener to listen to that TED talk, because it really talks a lot about what he just covered. Matt, this has been fantastic. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
I think I would just summarize what we talked in something that's pretty easy to remember, is that if you are a leader of people, please just remember that your primary job is to bring out the best in those people. That's it. And the good news is that making the move from being a boss to coach is actually, although it's not easy, it's super simple. It's
Mm.
what I call lazy leadership. You're making the move from telling people what to do to asking them good questions so that they figure out what are the right things to do for themselves. So that would be my summary, is please just remind yourself as often as you can that if you're a leader of people, my primary job is to inspire greatness in my team, helping people to thrive.
I love that. Such a great message. We need more of that message today, now more than ever. Matt, that's been fantastic. It's been fantastic meeting you, listening to you, having you on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you and the work you do? Maybe your books, your podcast?
Pretty easy. You can find me at matttenney.com if you're interested in pursuing or looking more into our approaches for developing high levels of or highly effective performance management. You can visit peoplethriver.com.
Fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Matt's resources, including the TED Talk, which I say is mandatory listening. If you're listening in, you've
Thank
got to
you.
watch that, because I think it's a great, I think TED Talks are amazing. This one's probably one of the best I've heard with respect to leadership. I highly encourage people to listen in on that. The link is in the show notes. But if you got a question for Matt, we've got his website right there. Take a look at it. Reach out to him. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions. Because I think what he's touching on is a really important topic in leadership today. Is like, how do we make more inspiring workplaces? How do we inspire greatness in our teams, in our companies, and in our employees? I think that's our job. It's our mission as leaders, and we need to do more of that. So, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for all of your insight on this really important topic.
Thanks for having me, John. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.